This is tutorial number 30, and it covers the spline definition within CATIA v5. To start off, open up a new CATIA v5 part file, and once you've done that, let's go into the sketcher. So let's click Sketch, and click any of the planes. Now what I'm going to do in this tutorial is I'm just going to kind of give you a brief overview of the spline tool, and I'm going to give you a definition of the actual spline and how you can actually calculate and find the spline. Now, the spline tool is located right here, or you can go through Insert, Profile, Spline, and get the spline. Now, if you've not already used the spline tool, you know that if you click a point and start moving it around, you're going to get a function or a profile that fits all of these points. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an overview of the spline tool and how it actually works. This is from one of the lectures that I've had going through engineering, and this is just kind of like an example just to show you like a reasonable and an unreasonable spline definition. So they both have the same point coordinates, but the difference is that as you're going around, one is reasonable and one is unreasonable. This one's unreasonable as it's shooting up all over the place. So really, you're not getting the true spline that you want. This one, it goes around, it curves around, and that's what you want. Now with a spline, each point, in between each point, each two sets of points, it's actually a different kind of function. So in here, this is function, we'll call this function x, function f, this can be function g, h, I, j, k. Each of those is a separate function, and they're totally different from one another. So this can be, just as an example, this one could be x squared, this one could be x to the power of 3, 2x to the power of 4, whatever. They're unique to one another, but you're only getting a segment of each of them. And when you get just that segment, that's what gives you the spline, so that at each, the real, I guess, key to the spline is that at each point, the transition point between the two different functions, at that point, they're the same number. So, say this is at point 0.5 here. At point 0.5, function h is the exact same as function g. So when they're at 0.5, they're the same, and you get a nice transition. So when you have something like this, it's not really true. Even though they do touch the points, it's an unrealistic spline. Now, doing the spline, if you just Google it, you can actually find there's many different ways that you can manually calculate the spline. So if we go into Paint, I'm just going to show you a couple examples of kind of like what a different spline, what it's going to do. So say we had, say this is like the y, this is the x, and say we have points going up just like this. If we have those points, and we'll change this to yellow, we're just going to get pretty much a straight line going right through them. But if we have points such as this, we need 3 different functions here, since we have 4 points, to fill up and to create the function. So I'll just kind of freehand. So we can say it's going to look something like this. But if we go to the yellow, let's say this is our first function. This function really actually continues, such as that. This function here is really something like that. And our last function there, we can say is something really like this. So you can see that we're kind of like cutting out patches of different functions and putting them together. So that's pretty much what the spline definition does. Now I'm just going to show you how that straight line, how it will actually make a straight line in the spline. So let's click Spline, and if we just draw in a straight line, we're just going to be creating a straight line, just like I showed you in the Paint. And if I do it kind of on an angle, it's still going to keep somewhat a straight line. So with the spline tool, you're actually making little functions that are being connected. So when you're actually using a spline, you might be using a function and a set of points. So it can be calculated outside of CATIA. And if you want to actually see how you can calculate and derive a spline through hand calcs outside of CATIA and just figure out actually how these functions are coming together, you can Google it, and there's numerous ways that you can either hand calc it, or there's probably some programs you can find out there that will calculate each function for you. And that concludes our tutorial on the introduction to the spline definition.